A computer? All right. Happy Wellness Wednesday, everyone. We are back with another live. My name is Xavier Tate. I am a mental health professional and I am the CEO of Light of the World. And today's live, we will be talking about how to support mental health in the LGBTQIA plus community. So we're going to let the panel introduce themselves, starting with Daniel.
Okay, well, hi everyone. I'm Daniel, part of LWI Corp. I am a drummer and a musician, amongst other things, and thanks for having me.
Awesome. And then we have our special guest and our wonderful intern, Will.
Hello, my name is Will. I'm currently a graduate student at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and I look forward to this talk.
Awesome. So we will be touching on heavy topics, like I said. So if this live is not meant for you, that is fine. We will see you on the next live. But other than that, let's get started. So first, we're gonna say Happy Wellness Wednesday again, and Happy Pride Month for our wonderful LGBTQIA listeners. We are celebrating you. We are super excited for you, and we are here to tell you about mental health. All right, and I'm gonna get myself out the way. I'm gonna let Will lead this one.
Are we not doing the intro? Okay. So the way I want to do this with Xavier and Dan is I thought you had said something. Is just kind of have an open discussion on it. While I am a gay male, I don't speak for the entire LGBTQ community. And I think anyone who says that, who tries to, probably doesn't have the best intent in mind. But one thing that I think is important, just as I am one, there's approximately 9 million adults in the United States who identify as gay or lesbian, making up 3.8% of the US population. Bisexuals account for 1.8%, or transgender 0.3%. But it comes down to importance of how we ask this question, because as we know now, there's more than just after Q. There's I, A, P for pansexual, intersex questioning, and then plus includes all, but also geographically where we ask this question. In the Pacific region, primarily where California, Oregon, and Washington are located, tend to have the highest rate of individuals who will check the box and identify as either gay or lesbian, bisexual, or transgender, or any sexuality other than straight. So I ask y'all this question: do you think that there are more individuals in the United States who are not straight?
That is a good question.
Yeah, it is. But I guess I'll start on this. I believe so, yes. And also, like I said, in places like California and all of those people, that's places that's more north. I've noticed they're more accepting. So one of the reasons why the more will check off. There is a few special cases, but they're more accepting than the certain part of the equation or the map. So yeah, obviously there is definitely a lot more than that, but not everybody's really take that step forward for various reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that's a big factor. And I want to correct myself real quick. I had said 3.8% of adults identify. It's 3.8 altogether, including bisexual and transgender. Obviously, this number may be greater. It will very likely be greater if we included other sexualities, such as asexual, and so forth and so forth. But it is 1.7. I don't know the breakdown between lesbian and gay, but I do think that Dan brings up a good point with acceptance, because currently There is talk in the news. We've seen in Florida with the Don't Say Gay bill. There's currently many other states that have this legislation up for debate or are currently have it on the books. It just hasn't been enforced as well. Maybe it's not gaining as much attention. But I think even looking back, we're all primarily from the South. 2 different states. I think everyone here currently lives in Alabama, and some of us have spent our whole life. But I grew up in Southern Louisiana. I don't think you can pretty much find a change of difference between the maybe the incidents that occur in school. You know, I think growing up in high school, the "don't gay" was a word that you could change for bad. And obviously, there's some other word choices that were commonly used, but this all comes back and helps me lead into my next point of bullying and mental illness within the LGBT community. LGBTQ individuals are twice as more likely as heterosexuals to have mental illness, with increased rates of depression and anxiety that can stem from bullying in high school. Now, I'm going to talk about my experience, and I know that if you would like, even from just everyone experiences it just a little bit different with coming out and such. But from my experience, it wasn't the best. I was bullied notoriously throughout my high school career. And it did kind of lead to some impression, even anxiety that affected other parts, such as my education. I still get nervous when I have to take a test and such, because I'm just afraid of the fear of failure and living up to that failure that I thought I was just destined to have. But did y'all notice when y'all were growing up of any of your friends or colleagues or even close family members who were members of the LGBTQ plus community that experienced difficulties at school?
Well, I'm trying to figure out what happened to Xavier, so I'll start this off. I'm trying to get him back. Tech difficulties, but yes, that has happened to some people I know in my family and friends as well, where especially not so very long ago, where this was still kind of new territory. People be a little bit iffy and off standards to what's different from them or who's different from them rather, and things of that factor. So us being humans usually tend to resist or even fight what we don't understand or accept or is too far offlandish from ourselves or heterosexuals. I identify as straight as well, just to play the air on that, I guess. So some people are afraid that being homosexual is contagious, which was a thing, which was a belief going around not too long ago as well. And they didn't want that affecting them or anywhere near their families, and like fathers to sons, mothers to daughters, and vice versa. Or even as far as people within their own families being outcasted, for lack of a better term, for being of a different orientation, sexual orientation. So that happens around a lot. Not too much. It hasn't happened in my family because even though we're mostly Christian based, we are also accepting and love our family, which is what really Christianity is about, to be completely transparent. So just because someone likes someone that is out of the norm, which there's no such thing as normal, but it's being more accepted now, thankfully. But what was at one point considered out of the norm, a lot of people are getting used to now and more acceptive of, and realizing that despite who you look, despite who you do your extracurricular activities with, you are still a person, you're still a human, you're still a man, a woman, or however you identify.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. And I think you bring up an interesting thing with religion. I when I came out, I was kicked out of my church. So I had a very tough relationship with I identify now as a Christian, but I had a very tough relationship with God, and even questioned if there was such an individual, just because of the pain that I was feeling at that moment. I just didn't believe that there was someone who would allow it. In 2021, I volunteered with the Trevor Project, and one thing that kind of brought me closer and back to my roots in Christianity, my faith, was that a lot of the individuals that I had talked with who were dealing with suicidal thoughts or tendencies were very faith-based, and that's what kind of made them question. And it made me again kind of look back at my upbringing and kind of think like, does Jesus really hate me? Does God really hate me? And does the church? And while some will argue, I've kind of come to my thing that, at the end of the day, Christianity is about helping others, as most other religions are. At the end of the day, whether I go up to the pearly gates and it's God or it's Buddha, I hope that they can look at my record and just show that I've done the best that I can and been as kind as I can to others. Whether that gets me through the gates, I don't know. But if it keeps me sane and keeps me happy, I think that's the best I can do. But I think it's just so important, especially we're all here. I think all of us are millennials. If not, we're very tend to be close to it, if not at the very end of Gen X. But I think one thing's important is just school and stuff. A lot of these issues, Dan brings up the gay spread, and that's true. I mean, when I was coming out, I bought into that tendency. Before I came out, when I kind of knew that I liked guys, and even after, I believed in it. And it's scary because it's just sort of, you're so lost in a place that everything just starts to make sense, even if it doesn't. But I think it's kind of negative. And it's negative not only to the individual, but anyone else who may be questioning coming out. So let me turn, because I haven't heard from him in a while, and I'm kind of surprised. Xavier, do you have any thoughts or inputs?
I just been enjoying the conversation. Like, this is one of those moments. Like, I know most of the time I would jump in, but like just hearing the wonderful feedback between you and Dan, like I just love it. But y'all literally took the words out of my mouth. But definitely, but I will come from I can't speak on a standpoint of as a straight individual and being transparent, because I believe in sharing sharing the lights and being the light on mental health. We talk about the good, bad, and ugly. So even though I identify as a straight individual, I have been sexually abused at a young age. So that led to me questioning my not gender identity, my sexual
orientation.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. My sexual orientation. And then I have been bullied because I am literally the sweetest person I am the sweetest person you meet. I'm always willing to help others, but growing up, everyone believed that if you don't have a deep voice like this, which hurts, or if you talk, or if you're not aggressive, if you're a man and you're not aggressive and you don't do sports and you don't talk with a deep voice, then you're automatically considered gay, especially in the African American, especially in our African American community, which is very, very upsetting because I personally come from a divorced family, and in my family, we didn't do sports. We do the arts. So we love going to art museums. We love Broadway. We love singing. We love dancing. We love poetry. Like, we love video games. So we did. So that toxic masculinity is what I had dealt with, and that also plays a huge role in LGBTQ plus mental health. But other than that, those are my thoughts.
Absolutely. And while I do kind of want to switch to such, I think something you bring up with that
Yeah.
for the masculinity aspect of it.
Yeah.
I remember as a child, I was helping my dad put down mulch. And I remember him just coming up and him being like, I'm not going to have a derogatory term for a son. I guess I was carrying the mulch in too girly of a way. I don't know how you can carry mulch in a girly way, but just things like that. And then we kind of, again, as you mentioned, and Dan mentioned earlier too, we kind of pick on people who we perceive as different. And then eventually, if we do it enough times, there's a chance that others may view it. And then in order to increase social status, to feel more accepted, we pick on others. And I think your point about maybe not being this ideal male is a perfect one. And this is something that I've run into, even like I sometimes struggle with. I'm not going to lie. You know, as we see in society right now, the ideal male is this really buff, athletic person who just seems to have their life in order. They never seem to make any mistake, and somehow they make a lot of money off of TikTok. And I'm over here like I'm working 4 jobs and I'm just barely making my rent. But I think that's the thing that's super, it's just crazy. And we put such a high societal standard. And so many people try to mask it and just such. But I think just being comfortable in oneself, I think it's just so hard to obtain. And even when you do obtain it, it's sometimes hard to kind of like keep it because society, again, just wants this perfect figure. And I think all of us can only attest to the male aspect of perfect. And obviously it'll differ from different upbringing and such. No two people, even if they walk the same path, tend to have, they may have a similar viewpoint, but they can have completely different viewpoints. And I think that's something to keep in mind. But one thing I do want to mention to kind of segue into is that with everything that kind of goes on with LGBTQ youth, there is a higher rate of suicide. I don't have the year, but I believe it have to be 2015 to above, is 39% report serious thoughts of suicide. Now, 40% of transgender adults have attempted suicide in their lifetime, compared to less than 5% of the general population. So there is, again, with some stigma and trauma that goes along, that can be as early as childhood, and it can also be off late adult. You know, people are still figuring themselves out. I've read reports of people in their 80s who have finally been open and they've begun their transition, and just stuff like that. And obviously with news, this issue becomes, with politics, we hear it in the news all the time, with certain laws that are being passed to discriminate against LGBTQ youth. It's very likely that these numbers will go up. But let's go back to suicide. So in LGBTQ people ages 10 to 24, so adolescents to young adult, suicide is the leading cause of death. In 2019, a school climate survey showed that 86% of LGBTQ youth reported being harassed or assaulted at school, which can significantly impact their mental health. African American, Hispanic, American Indian, or multiracial mixed transgender individuals had the highest risk of suicide than white transgender individuals. And the rate of suicide attempt for lesbian, gay, and bisexual youth is 4 times higher and 2 times higher for youth questioning their sexual identity than heterosexual youth. I don't know if y'all recall, to me it was really important. It's actually why I wanted to volunteer for the Trevor Project when I did. There was this big campaign in 2012. It was the It Gets Better Project. And for those who remember or those who don't, it wasn't directly with the Trevor Project, it was through Dan Savage's project. So let me make that correction. But during that time, there was this very high number of back-to-back, high-profile college and young kids committing suicide. For bullying, being reported gay. I remember there was one kid, and it breaks my heart that I can't remember his name, but he was bullied nonstop for acting girly to his classmates, to the horrific end that he went up after going to school, and he hung himself. And it was really heartbreaking. And a lot of school districts at that time were they were in hot water because they were like, we didn't hear the reports, but parents would come and be like, we've documented this, why don't you do anything? And I think this would be a good time. Were there any, obviously you can't talk to them, attest for their struggles and such, but were there any students, or even you in your class, who you would talk to, administrators or professors, and you just kind of felt like it was just not being heard?
That's a good question.
Yeah. I guess I'm just gonna start everything. But yeah, that has happened a lot. Not only to myself, but other associates of mine going through middle school, high school, that I was playing with that was of a different orientation than myself. And I've noticed in some things they paid attention to when other stuff was kind of covered up under the, they just swept it on up under there, said the yays and okays, and just yeah. So a lot of things, especially 5, 6, and 10 years ago, a lot of people were not ready to deal with and confront. So with that, they kind of swept it up under the rug and said they'll come back to it later, but end up never doing so. So that's where a lot of people feel like they don't get heard. So, and also at that time, 6, 10 years ago, the community being much more smaller and divided than they are now. There was a lot of resources where people felt like they could turn to get heard or talk to or get out their grievances. And especially if they cannot go home with this, since some parents are accepting, some are not, unfortunately. So with very little resources to turn to, that number was, and even now is still pretty high. So unfortunately now there's a lot more resources, there's a lot more people accepting, there's a lot more people that are friends with them. The community has grown dramatically. There's still some work to be done, but fortunately now it can kind of get to a place where you start to heal and grow, and some of these stigmas kind of break off, especially as more people get educated and understand and stop being so fearful of what could or could not happen, as far as whether the gay phase can affect them or nothing, which is not true. And there's no such thing as a gay phase. Everybody may have their moments, but but that's another story for another time. That's a lot. So all jokes aside, now people are not so much, especially with standing up against bullying of any type of variation, whether it be physical, cyber, and all the other variations I can't think of right now off the top of my head. There is less being swept under the rug and more being dealt with. And not only that, but also offering counseling for those that suffer from this, suffer from being bullied, suffer from being ridiculed, suffer being ostracized. Yeah, ostracized. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
It's all good. Closed caption will get it. We can correct it in the edit.
We'll edit that out. But,
I think you bring up a really good point, and actually something that I haven't addressed but is really important with regard. Again, I can't attest for the whole community. And I know that there's been issues, and there's still issues today, especially with race, especially with pride and such. There was a big issue not that long ago in Chicago, where North Chicago and South Chicago kind of had a debate of where do we do pride. South Chicago is primarily Black, with North Chicago being primarily white. So there was very issues of how they wanted to handle things. And we've gone through, I mean, George Floyd was in 2020, and then we've had various cases, Philando Castile and such, but that kind of also brought in questions for the LGBT community of who's really being valued, because it seems like we're not at the table to discuss the relationship with police, which is how Stonewall happened. It was a whole complete riot against police and governance at the time and legislation. But another thing that's really important is when Stonewall was happening, those who were in positions of power, those who did have positions of power already and were able to discuss, were primarily white, cisgender, gay males. There may have been a bisexual male on, but there were even talks of not including people who were transgender. So they already feel ostracized at the very beginning, even though they were pivotal to helping get the rights of gay, bisexual, and lesbians, opportunities and such in society. But yeah, I also think another thing that's really interesting, the study was from 2019, where it reported the school climate survey, but it'd be interesting to see how online learning kind of affected it. We talk about cyberbullying and such, but physical bullying, I think, can be sometimes a little bit more aggressive. A punch from the internet can hurt, but a real punch can definitely hurt. But I think that would be something, and they probably have that data, and it'll be interesting to see. Very likely probably went down, but to see if it goes back up. But yeah, before we move on, did anyone have any, Xavier, did you have any input or anything?
Nope, not this time.
Oh, that is one more thing I want to talk about, since we were just talking about differences in race. So one community I mentioned before, when the early LGBTQ movement was happening post Stonewall, again, there was kind of this talks of, do we include the transgender community? Because at the time there was a stigma. Many people, some politicians, Barney Frank, who was the first ever elected LGBT gay male to Congress, kind of questioned if it would be beneficial, because people could kind of wrap their head around someone who was gay or bisexual or a lesbian. You may know someone in your family who fits into one of those boxes, but it's very rare at that time, unless you go out and you're active in the medical or clinical or volunteering at homeless shelters, to see someone who's transgender. It's not as common. Which doesn't make it a bad thing. It's just not as common to have someone that you know, or someone that you know who is transgender. And unfortunately, this goes into all communities and they kind of get neglected, but it's those who are from color, POCs, and non-white groups that have very difficult times in school and such, because the schools just lack the necessary funding to kind of address and kind of discuss those issues in an appropriate manner to positively uplift. I know in my school, it was rather difficult. I think it was me and one other person who were actively out, the two males. I don't know, can't remember any females off the top of my head, but it was just difficult. And I know we did have in middle school one student who had talked about transitioning, but I believe that they had to go to a private school. It was just that intense, which also blows my mind that this is a public school. You don't really have a choice, and you only got one school and one school district. But it also just puts a financial strain, and it's just really tough. I mean, it can be, it can be tough. It's not. It's always tough to the individual. And this isn't to minimize their coming out, but it can be rather difficult to the family as a whole, especially when they support them, because now you get hit from all. Again, my family got removed from their church. They were told, you need to leave, you need to find somewhere else. And it was just difficult. I think that's something that I've kind of had to come and understand their viewpoint. I don't have the best relationship with my family, and there were other factors, but kind of seeing that also. So let's move on to stats of discrimination against LGBTQ plus individuals. It's no surprise that minority groups in the United States experience discrimination, obviously at different levels, and there's different law in the books protecting and such. But transgender individuals have the highest rate of unemployment and poverty than non-transgender individuals. This can be an issue. Obviously, work can't actively discriminate against you, but they can give other reasons for why you're being fired. I had a friend who was a manager, assistant manager at McDonald's, and he was telling me about they had hired an individual who had transitioned, and throughout their entire training process, they were constantly misgendered and such, to the point where it was intentional. It wasn't just a misslip. It wasn't anything. And if they weren't being mean about it, they were actually very quiet, because, you know, when you work some of these jobs, you're doing it to make rent. You really just kind of accept stuff and just kind of push it off. But they made this individual feel so small and like pointless, and just, it was horrible from what they say. It's horrible. And I kind of wish my friend would have stepped up and do something, but I also can see from the perspective, you know, it's scary to sometimes stand up, especially to someone in a position of power, because you could lose your job. But I think the best thing that I've kind of learned is do it. If you, especially in those types of settings, I guarantee you have the legal right to defend. I think it would be very bad PR if McDonald's was actively discriminating. So those in the LGBT community are more likely to be victims of violence than heterosexual individuals. There's still laws on the book. I can't remember the name of them, but the description of them is, I believe you can get away with murder, basically. If you murder an individual who, if you're going in for a romantic relationship or sexual interaction and you find out that they are the opposite gender, there are people who have gotten away with quote unquote murder for those interactions and are currently walking. And hate crimes are on the rise. Society is getting back out there in the worst way possible. So I think also just being an ally and again stepping up. If you do have any friends that are members of the LGBT community, you know, if they're walking out at night, it may be best to just walk with them. There's strength in numbers. It deters people, but also just kind of being open with them and just talking with them and making sure they feel comfortable. So again, many LGBTQ plus individuals have reported feeling stigmatized or discriminated against when seeking health services. Luckily, UAB does a really good job. I will admit, I may have a bias because this is where I tend to find myself, but the 1917 clinic is really good. That's the premier HIV/AIDS clinic. And they're really great. There's another facility right next to them, and it's going to come up.
What about the Magic City Acceptance Center?
Yes, that's it. I was just wondering the name of it. So yeah, Magic City Center is a great one. I believe they have two. The Magic City Wellness Acceptance Center is in 1917, but I believe there's one more. And there's some other organizations. I'm blanking at the top of my head, but if you Google PFLAG is another good one for parents to get involved. But there are so much more. And there's ones for every,
one.
yeah.
I was saying another one is called The Hub. It's also downtown. It's also in downtown Birmingham. I think near Iron City, Birmingham. But they also help the LGBTQIA community members.
Yeah, absolutely. So many great resources and such. And I think even if you're in a part of a town that doesn't, I think just starting something such as like a PFLAG or a GLSEN is a great way to start changing community culture and such, and just being more accepting. It benefits everyone. Diversity benefits everyone, and having diverse voices at the table and promoting voices is a great way to level out the playing field. We should all be punching up, not punching down. So one other thing, even with all these, we're in a very niche part of Alabama in the South, but there are other parts such as Coleman and various others, maybe farther down, and I wouldn't say Mobile, but around there, that have less social support than others. is. And that's true. You know, if you grow up in a rural town, we've mentioned about this idea of a masculine male that is not this very feminine, but there is no real definition of men that we have one in the dictionary, biological we have, but I think just kind of changing those. We all have different personalities, and how we do that doesn't necessarily define our sexuality and our gender identity. But with that, I think one other thing. I do think one thing I want to talk about just before we transition, since we brought up the HIV/AIDS clinic, and just going back to even high school, because again, the biggest leading cause of death in LGBTQ youth is suicide from the age of 10 to 24 is HIV/AIDS. You know, luckily in this year we have so much technology that we can basically make the virus untraceable and very hard to spread if you're on your medication and such. And there are studies that people with HIV/AIDS tend to live longer due to them continually getting access to healthcare, going to their doctors, getting routine checkups. But I remember when I came, or actually before I came out, because I came out at the end of 8th grade, we did sex ed in 7th. And I remember my teacher just straight up telling me, like, this is what you're going to be experiencing as you put on this documentary of this guy dying from HIV/AIDS, which I thought was just insane. Yeah, it was just a very crazy thing. Yeah. Which again goes back to, you know, some schools, while they may not listen to it, but some schools actively promote it. This idea of discrimination or turning the other cheek, or not turning the other cheek, turning their face away to avoid it. But yeah, it was just very, very scary, because at the time I hadn't even come to terms with my sexuality, and I'm here watching this man die this horrible death. I mean, if you've ever seen videos from the early 80s from someone suffering from HIV/AIDS, cancers were severe. They usually died of pneumonia and any other common infection, but they were very, I guess, sickly looking, which was quite sad. Even just during the initial pandemic, there was a lot of discrimination. Early on, they couldn't get a burial. Parlor homes didn't want them, funeral homes didn't want them. But luckily, we have progressed so much, and I hope that one day we can develop a vaccine and we can eradicate HIV from the face of the earth. But I think another thing to also talk about while I have this is get tested and such. It's now more common for heterosexual individuals to have HIV than it is individuals of the LGBTQ community, just because of the stigma and this idea to get tested. But everyone should get tested, know your status. But with that, did anyone want to put in anything, or did anyone want to discuss anything a little bit further?
Oh, I want to ask you, how can we listed a lot of content, like first of all, Will, woo! Thank you for the wonderful education. Like, this is very this is very eye-opening.
Also, thanks for saying ostracized earlier. Yeah. I said
it is very eye-opening and such thing. We had mentioned a few resources, but I want to segue into Dan. Like, Dan, how can Dan and Will, like, how can we people of faith support the LGBTQIA community? Because we already know about church. We know about church hurt. We know about I'm stepping on toes, but like I said, the good, the bad, the ugly. But like, we know about church hurt. We know about excommunicated. Like, how can we people of faith support the LGBTQIA community? And any one of y'all.
Well, I'll start off with that. Once again, being as Christian based as I am, and heavily involved in my church, how to start off with this. Okay.
Just rip the Band-Aid off.
That part. But at one point in time, this was, especially if this was new to a lot of people and all of these benefactors, it wasn't really accepted in the church because there's so many scriptures going against them when there's really, after looking at them more thoroughly, they're not as specifically as people once thought. They've just been translated that way. So, side note, let's station in.
Okay.
Monitor things. Anyway,
Okay.
as I was saying, there was a lot of things misconstrued and interpreted differently. Can't speak today. So there was a lot of people that had to unlearn those what's the word? Stigmas and dramatizations that was so established back in the early 80s and 90s. So there was a lot of unlearning a lot of people had to do.
It's pretty good. I'm old, baby. I'm 60 years old. Old.
Station, put yourself on mute, baby.
We apologize. We hope you enjoy some minor entertainment while we're but back to you, Dan.
I love life. Okay. Okay, so I'll just decide to get back on track. There was a lot of unlearning that many people in the ministry had to go through. And now they are more accepting of things and understanding. Many of them will be truthful and honest on their views, but nevertheless, they are still there to support you and welcome you and be supportive in any way that they can. There is going to be a learning curve for a lot of people because once again, this unlearning is new and it's going to be a little bumpy ride. So we're going to have to brace ourselves and there's going to have to be a lot of understanding. In other words, we're going to get a lot of stuff really fast. But all jokes aside, once that learning curve is kind of gotten past, and that unlearning of those stigmas and dramatizations, and at one point was just straight up hatred, just to be completely honest, is unlearned and erased from the system and really being what Christianity is, which is love, truth, and honesty, without hurting people's feelings, without going out the way to hurt people, without going out the way to put your own stigmas and expectations and sideways thoughts and getting your flesh out the way, to be completely just to rip it out, get your flesh out the way. Yeah. And be what God is really about. And realize that we don't have a heaven or hell to put nobody in. We don't decide who do not go through those gates. Because to be honest, some of us might not even make it. So, yeah, I said it. I said it.
What's now? You stepping out some town, aren't you, Dad?
Hey, it's the truth. Not everybody that thinking they right is right. So, to get ourselves out the way and let people be who they are, be truthful, be honest in a respectful way, but still be there to support them, still be there to have their back, and read the room. Know what to and not to say. All of these insensitive jokes, they can be thrown away. And even if they're not meant coming from a place to cause harm, sometimes they can. It depends on the person's perspective. It depends on how they see things and how strong they are. Everybody's different. Some people see it as the joke that it is, and sometimes it's not as much as the joke that it seems. So yeah, that's a great area. Once again, a lot of things have to be unlearned, and adapted, and things of that nature. I got a bit realer than I meant to, but that is the truth. Um,
Yeah.
so, and this is coming from me being a Christian myself. Like I said, I'm not gonna say it, but no, I am an avid believer, and that's just the truth of the matter. But a bunch of that comes with a bunch of unlearning and those stigmas that's been put on it. Also, to go back to some of the things Will said about propaganda from the 80s and stuff. It's not a gay illness. HIV is not a gay thing. It's not only circled around them. And also the JC Jefferson County Health Department is a great resource as well, because 9 times out of 10, most of them will provide testing not only for HIV and AIDS, but trichomonas, gonorrhea, chlamydia, hepatitis, syphilis, and everything else. And if 9 times out of 10, they will do that for free.
Yeah.
And if not for free, they will work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Alabama Public Health is a great one. I think 8 to 5, you can walk in from Monday through Friday. You can walk in at any time and request a test. I don't know about the others, but I know HIV/AIDS, but very likely in the same STI clinic. So I think Dan brings up a really good point. Obviously, while one could wish that it's not even just Christianity that has an issue with acceptance of LGBTQ plus people. Every religion has a factor in it that tends to have an issue. I think one thing that just needs to be understood is that, you can't forcibly bend someone and break them. Religion definitely is important to people, which it should be if they believe in it. Be kind and humble and gentle and graceful. I think having that, with that in mind, it can be from both sides. I think advocates for the LGBTQ plus community need to understand that it's not just going to change in one day. It's small steps. But I think one thing that individuals could do, and obviously the interpretation, the text that you mentioned, Daniel, I'm assuming it's the one from Leviticus, where man shall not lie with man, or they will get stoned. Absolutely, yeah. Is an interpretation, but that's a big one, especially in American churches. It's constantly read, usually around election times. So I think one thing that could be done is, just try to find a church that's accepting. And you may have to go church shopping. I know me and my family had to do it a lot. I think we went to 5 different churches, and we weren't able to find the perfect one that we kind of wanted, but we were able to find one that was able to be open-minded. And I think that's the best thing. I had to look up some quotes, but I think this is a good one. So Ephesians 4:2, be completely humble and gentle, be patient, bearing with one another in love. Again, these are not things that are just going to change the next day. And it's very likely they won't even change in our lifetime. It's going to take some time. And then John 15:12, my command is this: love each other as I loved you. Just do your best. It's definitely a learning curve for everyone. And it's just something that's going to take some time. And obviously, it's not going to be the smooth transition. I don't expect it to be a smooth transition even years from now. But I think just being open. At the end of the day, Jesus Christ loved everyone equally. He was known to be with the individuals, the lepers, and the prostitutes, rather than the riches of the rich. So I think just do that and just kind of be open, and don't diminish someone or try to break them down. I think we're all on a journey, whether it be a spiritual, a life, a social. Just do your best to make sure everyone is comfortable.
Exactly, because Jesus and God is for everyone that wants to accept them. There's no limitations. Once again, like I said, be honest with people, tell them the truth and love, and then after that, let them live their life. Let them build a relationship and let that whatever it may be on the other side. I don't know what's there, what's not though.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, we'll find out when we all get done when we leave this planet.
Exactly. We're all gonna have to. In Catholicism, is Saint Peter who sits at the pearly gates. We're all gonna have to go through his list. And there's if we have Jesus in our hearts, we get in. But again, Saint Peter could be like, "Nah, there's some hatred covering up. You gotta take a few steps back."
Take another lap around that mountain.
Exactly. And I think this also just to be extended to other factors and such, there's different, just anything. It doesn't just have to be LGBTQ plus individuals, just everything. Again, we're all on a journey through life. No one is guaranteed tomorrow. No one is guaranteed the next second, but just stuff such as that. Just be kind, humble, patient, and understanding that it takes time to make monumental change.
I love it. Yes. Well, as we know, y'all have done it. Like, for our virtual audience, let's give Will and Dan a hand clap. Yeah. But as we wrap up, we said the resources earlier, but we're gonna do a recap of resources. So we have Alabama Department of Health, Alabama Department of Jefferson County of Health. We have the Hub. We have 1917 Clinic, the Magic City Acceptance and Wellness Center, and we also have for our listeners who are transgender, we have Take here in Birmingham. It's called Take Birmingham as well. So we have that, and of course we have the Crisis Center hotline 205-323-7777, and then we got the National Suicide Hotline. But at the end of the day, our main takeaway is we see you, we hear you, we love you, and that you are not alone. We are here. Yes. We are here to support you every step of the way. Any last thoughts?
I think just one more resource that I want to plug in is the Trevor Project. You had mentioned the National Suicide Hotline. So the Trevor Project runs a similar operation. You can text, chat, or call anytime with anyone. We go through extensive training. While I haven't been with them anymore, I've been told that the training's become more intense, and the people who are the counselors are very well trained, and they can they can help. And Trevor Project has some great resources and such. And I had mentioned if PFLAG and GLSEN or other organizations for parents, if they have children who are members of the LGBTQ plus community. Yeah, but other than that, no, that's it.
Okay, and just to speak for Stacia, since she's unable to speak at this moment, she does want to affirm on the people that you do you, regardless of who you are.
Yeah.
That's all.
Awesome. Well, we hope you enjoyed this wonderful live. And like I said, we love you, and we are here to be the light and share and shine the light on mental health and illness, the good, the bad, the ugly. So we will see you next time. Have a happy Wellness Wednesday. Bye.